Live by the truth. Live in the light. In a world that has long been trying to rule out absolutes, we need to remember that light and truth are undeniables. The sun shines above, and though people might deny it or accept it, it just does what it does. And the Son of God, reject or deny him, that does not change who he is or what he has done. As we're going to look at John 3, 19 to 21 this morning, this is the end of Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus. I'd like to begin the reading at John 3, 16, where we read, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. But whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God." Last week we looked at verses 16 to 18. And this morning, John 3, 19 to 21. And though people love John 3:16 and the notion of the great love of God to give his Son for the world, God still has an expectation of acceptance of him and obedience to his will. His love does not remove the condemnation or the judgment from those who refuse to duly acknowledge God, to acknowledge Jesus, and to acknowledge his will. And so John says, this is the judgment or the verdict that is to be acknowledged in verse 19. "And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil." Light has come. And krisis, the word translated here, judgment, is accusation, condemnation, or judgment. It's a word that denotes a process of investigation, the act of distinguishing and separating, a passing of judgment on a person or thing. Now, Jesus knew hearts. He knew what was within humanity. However, even outwardly, the distinction between acceptance and rejection became very evident as well. It became as evident as night and day, as there were those who embraced Jesus and began to follow Jesus, and those who just outrightly rejected him, regardless of the signs that he did, asking for signs but denying him and rejecting what signs he did show. But the two things to which this judgment relates here is that light has come. This was how John introduced even the Messiah in John chapter 1, in John 1 verses 4 through 5, as John was writing this gospel, where he said, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Light is more powerful than darkness, and Jesus is more powerful than the darkness. Jesus declared this reality in association with him himself. In John 8:12, there we read where Jesus made the statement again. Jesus spoke to them saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And then in John chapter 9, where Jesus healed the man who was born blind and put mud in his eyes and had him go and wash in the pool of Siloam. There in John 9 verses 4 through 5 we read Jesus saying to his disciples, "We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And then later on in John chapter 12 and verse 46, there we read, I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. As the light, Jesus declares the blessing of coming to him and acknowledging him, of coming into relationship with him and coming out of the darkness. But people have loved the darkness instead of light because their actions were evil. And so that is the judgment. Light has come, but there are those who have rejected the light, who preferred darkness to light. Those whose works are evil, deeds are evil, prefer the darkness to hide them rather than light to reveal them. It's like those who commit crimes in the darkness at night so that they are not seen and people are not around. And here, those who do their deeds of wickedness don't want to come into the light and be exposed. And this tendency is nothing new of those who prefer that which is false or prefer that which is evil to that which is true and that which is good. In Isaiah chapter 30, and verses 8 through 11 of God's own people, we read here, "And now go, write it before them on a tablet, and inscribe it in a book, that it may be for the time to come as a witness forever. For they are a rebellious people, lying children, children unwilling to hear the instruction of the Lord, who say to the seers, 'Do not see,' and to the prophets, 'Do not prophesy to us what is right. Speak to us smooth things. Prophesy illusions. Leave the way. Turn aside from the path. Let us hear no more about the Holy One of Israel.'" They wanted a different message than the truth. They wanted things that made them feel good. They wanted things that would tickle their ears. They wanted smooth things, and they were not open to the warnings that they were in need of as a rebellious people. And even in Jeremiah chapter 5 and verses 30 to 31, there we read, "An appalling and horrible thing has happened in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule at their own direction. My people love to have it so. But what will you do when the end comes?" There is final judgment that is to come. What good will it do for us to accept falsehood? To seek those who would teach only what we want to hear rather than us listening to what we need to hear and thus be directed in God's way. But this is the way the people loved it during the days of Jeremiah. And so light had come, but there were those who preferred the darkness. And those choosing to do wickedness, as we see in John 3 and verse 20, "For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed." They are those who hate the light. And there were those who hated Jesus. In John chapter 7 and verses 1 through 7, we read, "After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. So his brothers said to him, 'Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world.' For not even his brothers believed in him." It's still a time of difficulty for his siblings in accepting who Jesus was. But note verse 6. "And Jesus said to them, 'My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify about it that its works are evil.'" Jesus was a light that exposed. His teaching was a light that exposed the wickedness of others. And Jesus was hated because there were so many times when he was saying things that the Jewish leadership knew was really directed at them. And they would not accept his message. Jesus later on even told his disciples not to be surprised at what they had experienced because of the way he himself had been treated. In John chapter 15 and verses 18 to 20, Jesus said, "If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own, but because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will also keep yours." They were not of the world because they were with Jesus. And because they were with the light, there was incompatibility there with the world. And there were those who, in their wickedness, saw that incompatibility with the light and with the truth. And Jesus tells his disciples not to be surprised if they're dealt with the very same way that he was dealt with, because they belonged to him. Look at the world today. We are surrounded by wicked deeds and the love of sin. And these are a great cause of man's hatred of religious truth and the standard that God has given to us, because the light of truth exposes, and there are those who just do not want to see, those who just do not want to accept. And so they hate religion and the standard that is there in accordance with God's will. And so here are those who don't want to come into the light. They prefer the darkness. They prefer being in the shadows. They want to remain hidden. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be exposed, because that's just what light naturally does. Light is greater than darkness, and light simply exposes as it shines. Remember what Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians 5 and verses 11 to 14. He says, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. For anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, 'Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.'" Have we woken up? Oh, this world needs to wake up and to recognize the light and to be open to the light, to receive the light, to begin to love the light. But there are those who hate the light. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. Even without speaking a word, the light of truth can shine from our life, can shine from our actions. Our own godly actions expose wickedness because of the great contrast that there is to living by the truth and to living after the things of the world. And so just shining our light, that alone is enough. Our actions, right actions alone is enough to sometimes enrage some who refuse to accept God's standard. And so they will mock, and they will ridicule, and they will turn to name-calling because of the standard by which we live. But those choosing to live by the truth are willing to come into the light. As Jesus said, "But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God." Perhaps here is an allusion to the idea that Nicodemus had come to him at night. He had come to him cautiously at night. A good conscience is a basis for true courage and coming into the light and not hanging about in the shadows, in the darkness. But here are those who choose to live by the truth, who are willing to come into the light. And again, noting some words that Paul spoke or wrote to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians 5, 8 through 10, a few verses just prior to what we noted just a moment ago. He says, "For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord." You see, those who come into the light, they don't mind being discerned. They don't mind being exposed. Those in the truth don't mind being exposed. Those who are not in the light don't want their hearts exposed, don't want their hearts revealed for what they are. Trying to walk with Jesus, there's no fear of being in the light because of the recognition of the blessing that there is in being in the light and seeing as we ought to see. See, their joy is found in seeing one's works having been connected with God. As he says here, "But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God." In a connection with God, and in a mindfulness of God, and seeking to please God and follow his will. There's rejoicing with the relationship to the light. Those who live according to the truth love the light and rejoice in it, that their works have been justified by the light of truth. They know that it is in accordance with God's will. Rejoice that light exposes. See, we can rejoice that sin is exposed in our life. Not that we rejoice that there is sin, but we rejoice that we see it, we acknowledge it, and have this opportunity to see it as it is and to repent of it, to turn from it and walk on with the Lord. Rejoice that light leads. We can see the path and are led out of darkness and remain walking in the light. Know that we have also a bright, glorious, eternal future because of our relationship with Jesus. And rejoice in the power to be changed, truly enlightened by the truth of God's Word, and thus transformed in connection with Christ. Transformed more and more like his bright and glorious being, as he is light, as we walk in his light. And then we also need to accept his calling to be light ourselves in this dark world in which we live. In the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 and verses 14 to 16, there Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." See, not merely draw attention to ourselves by our good works, but ultimately that God would be glorified because we are fulfilling and carrying out his sovereign will in our life. We are lights in this world, not to be hidden away, not to be covered up, but lights to shine, and that's what light does. Light just naturally shines. And living the truth of God in our life, we are going to shine. Following with Jesus and being in his light, we are going to be reflecting his light to this world. In the relationship that we have with God through Christ, let us remember the words of David and the blessing of the relationship with truth. In Psalm 139, verses 23 to 24, David says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." Can that be our desire? Can that be our prayer? To be fully open to the searching of God, to know us, and to reveal to us who we are and what we are and how we are, and thus then lead us in that which is right, that which is true, to lead us in the way everlasting. Let us be those who continue to love the truth, to love the light, and thus live in the truth and live in the light, knowing that to love the truth and to love the light is the best thing for us, to be exposed as we are, and then to be transformed to be as the Lord would have us. No fear of being in the light, to be able to see us as we are, the changes that need to take place, and then to be able to follow on with Him. Let that be our desire, that we would be led in the way everlasting.